There's a special corner of the 90s gamescape where pastel dinosaurs moonlight as ballistics engineers and basic trigonometry masquerades as Saturday morning candy. Welcome to Bust a Move on the Super Nintendo, the cartridge that taught an entire generation how to eyeball 45-degree bank shots long before they could spell isosceles. How weird is it that two knee-high dragons, Bub and Bob, recently downsized from their Puzzle Bobble heroics, became the de facto professors of snack-sized physics? Rhetorical question, self-answer, very, followed by a guilty grin. Is the game criminally underrated, the puzzler equivalent of a Criterion Collection B-movie? Or is it secretly overrated, a sugary time sink coasting on mascot nostalgia? Trick question. We already know labels melt faster than bubble clusters once the ceiling drops. Let's pop some memories, crack a few jokes, and find out why this 4 megabit sliver of plastic still commands my respect and my sleep schedule 30 years on. Historical context. When Puzzle Bobble, its birth name, first hoisted itself onto Taito's B-System boards in late 1994, the arcade scene was drowning in versus puzzlers. Puyo Puyo dominated candy-colored Match 3 showdowns, columns kept Genesis kiosks busy, and Tetris was still the pop culture yardstick. Into that fray stepped two dragons with a twist. Instead of passive gravity drops, they offered pinball-adjacent ricochets that rewarded geometry nerds and punished the impatient. The coin-op cleaned up overseas, so a console migration was inevitable, and fast. The SNES port arrived in North America in March 1995, barely 6 months after the arcade debut, slotting neatly between Chrono Trigger's hype cycle and Donkey Kong Country 2's marketing blitz. Nintendo's 16-bit hardware was entering its late-game renaissance, churning out technical flexes like Yoshi's Island, even as PlayStation propaganda seeped into magazines. Against that backdrop, Taito shipped Bust a Move on a humble 4 megabit ROM, paltry compared with the 32 megabit behemoths hogging store shelves, yet enough to hold 100 levels, all music tracks, and a full V's mode without additional chips or fancy Mode 7 fluff. Next Generation magazine even poked fun at the tiny size in its review sidebar. 4 megabits per second. Must be magic. But the truly wild tale hides in the American location test. Taito, worried that US kids didn't recognize cutesy dragons, reskinned the arcade prototype as Bubble Buster. Bub and Bob were evicted in favor of two disembodied Mickey gloves that lobbed marbles at the ceiling like haunted carnival prizes. The public response? Mild horror. The cabinet bombed during its Chicago trial run and was shelved, leaving behind rumors, a dumped ROM in MAME, and forum posts that read like creepypasta for puzzle historians. I like to imagine an alternate timeline where glove mascots dominate esports merch, but reality, thankfully, reinstated our bubble-belching reptiles before the SNES cart went gold. Personal flashback, I first met Bust a Move in the fluorescent purgatory of a bowling alley lobby. Between league frames, I'd siphon quarters into a cab wedged beside Virtua Cop and a permanently tilted air hockey table. By the time the SNES version hit retail, my muscle memory could draw the game's aimer brackets in the dark. The cartridge had two killer perks the arcade lacked. 1. Infinite rematches without a coin timer. And 2. The ability to sabotage friendships at any hour of the night, courtesy of a couch and a second controller. No quarters, no closing bell, just a password screen and the promise of bleary-eyed dawn. Mechanics. Let's crack the hood, because the secret sauce is pure, unfiltered geometry. Imagine a vertical well 9 tiles wide, ceiling packed with rainbow bubbles hanging like candy-coated stalactites. At the bottom sits your cannon, rotating on a one-dimensional pivot. Tap left or right on the SNES D-pad and your tiny crosshair slides and pixel-sized nudges. Fine enough to split imaginary atoms, coarse enough to punish hubris. Fire a bubble, and if it contacts 2 matching colors, the trio pops, dropping any orphans below. Simple. Except every 5 shots, or after a brief hesitation, the ceiling ratchets down 1 row, threatening to swallow you whole. The SNES port tweaks arcade timing. Shots travel a hair slower, and the aiming increments feel 1 notch coarser. Most emulation experts chalk it up to CPU cycle differences between the arcade's Motorola 68000 and the console's Ricoh 5A22. Regardless, the effect is dramatic. Long ricochets become slow-mo suspense reels, giving you just enough time to whisper apologies to your future self. In verse mode, those milliseconds let you side-eye your opponent. Are they biting nails, counting colors, or silently drafting a revenge chain? Pro tip, it's usually all of the above. Stage design escalates from kid glove tutorial to Euclidean hazing ritual. Early boards are symmetrical diamonds begging for obvious clears. Mid-game introduces gray stone bubbles, unpoppable anchors that force you to thread color needles like a caffeinated billiard shark. Then there's Stage 29, my personal nemesis prime, a dangling red cluster hooked to a single stone pivot. The optimal line, a banked blue that navigates a V-shaped corridor, clips 2 matching blues up top and yanks down half the ceiling. Feels like landing a triple axel on roller skates. I've nailed it maybe 1 in 50 attempts. The other 49 end with a Jackson Pollock mess and a humiliation jingle. Comedy rant interlude, the SNES version's password system. 6 characters drawn from a subset of ASCII that looks suspiciously like someone ate their alphabet cereal by color. Misread a 0 for an O. And congratulations, you're replaying 20 levels because 1995 hadn't invented autosave. But Mark, you say? At least it's better than no continue. Sure, and being chased by 1 velociraptor is better than being chased by 3. Perspective. Speaking of hidden treats, enter the sound test. It's disabled by default, but flip 3, Pro Action Replay Bytes. 8081BC7F plus 8081BD82 plus 8081BE8B, and the main menu morphs into a jingle jukebox, complete with a scrapped location test track that may have accompanied those cursed gloves. Discovering it feels like rummaging through your attic and finding a mixtape labeled Secret Dragon Lullabies 1994. And for the Mythbusta-Move files, in 2015, Eric Demain and friends dropped a paper proving that Perfect Info Puzzle Bobble is NP complete. Translation: solving arbitrary boards is as computationally nasty as any logic nightmare we've formalized. No rainbow bubbles, no jokers, just pure color math. So every time you brute force a late game puzzle at 3 a.m., you're basically LARPing as a supercomputer minus the air conditioning bill, legacy, and influence. Did Bust-A-Move rewrite video game history? Not in the blockbuster sense. It's sequels. Bust-A-Move again, Super Bust-A-Move, Puzzle Bobble, every bubble. Yes, really. Mostly iterate on physics and add story fluff about rainbow kingdoms, but the original's DNA seeped everywhere. Mobile juggernauts like Zuma and Peggle borrow its one-button precision shot ethos. Indie darlings wrap twin-stick controls around the same color-matching skeleton. Competitive longevity skews regional. Japanese arcades still host Puzzle Bobble brackets sandwiched between shmup score attacks and Street Fighter III. Third Strike nostalgia pods. Western esports, less keen on slow-boil spatial reasoning, let it slide into cult status. Yet the game's couch-friendly brutality arguably paved the path for Mario Party's wholesome backstabs and Smash Bros.'s pastel chaos. Proof that you can annihilate friends while maintaining cartoonish plausible deniability. Why didn't it eclipse Tetris in mainstream memory? Timing. The SNES cart landed mere months before 32-bit launch hype devoured magazine covers. Within a year, Super Mario 64 convinced everyone that 3D cameras were the new hotness, and single-screen puzzlers looked quaint. Yet Bub and Bob remain pop culture perennials, resurfacing on Switch eShop sales and Cameo merch. Yes, I own Bub socks. Plenty of flashier contemporaries. Arrow the Acrobat, Clay Fighter, pick your mascot, collect dust in ROM sets. Are bubble dragons, still monetizing geometry like tiny capitalists. Then there's academic resonance, that NP-complete proof vaulted Puzzle Bobble into the same lecture slides as Rubik's Cubes and Sudoku, ensuring that computer science majors accidentally speed-run the tutorial while their professor explains set cover reductions. I've witnessed freshmen burn half a lecture scratching bubble trajectories in the margins of their notebooks. Education in action, folks. Closing paragraph plus score. So here we stand, decades later, cartridges sun-bleached but functional, thumbs poised over D-pads that creak louder than our backs. Bust-A-Move on SNES survives because it weaponizes elegance. One screen, one mechanic, infinite ego bruises. The 4 megabit limitation forced razor-sharp design, the dragons disarm your salt, and every successful triple bank unleashes enough dopamine to qualify as a controlled substance. Yes, the password system is a hate crime against convenience. Yes, the AI occasionally oscillates between slapstick clown and clairvoyant menace, but the instant your perfect ricochet dismantles half the ceiling and your buddy yells, "No way," Well, that's the sound of timelessness. Final verdict, 8.5 out of 10. Deduct half a point for glove-based nightmare fuel, another full point for those cursed passwords, then add 2 points for teaching my younger self, and now my own kid, that geometry is basically sorcery with cuter mascots. Insert coin, well, cartridge, launch bubble. Achieve enlightenment, repeat ad infinitum.